For 3 weeks, Renee Caswell had walked past the same corner every night after her shift. Dark gray suit from the discount rack, white button-up shirt that never seemed to stay crisp past noon, and that plastic ID badge hanging from a blue lanyard around her neck like a neon sign announcing her insignificance. Intern, in bold letters that caught the fluorescent lights of every elevator she rode. She was 24, black, grinding through 70-hour weeks at K-Corp Tower while living off instant ramen, and the kind of hope that makes you check your empty bank account 3 times a day like the numbers might magically change. She kept every receipt in a manila folder. Organization made her feel less powerless, even when the math never worked in her favor. She took the 11 p.m. route home because it was faster, cutting through the financial district when it emptied out, when the suits disappeared and the city showed its real face. That corner sat at the intersection of glass towers and forgotten streets, where the rain pooled in potholes and the streetlights flickered like they were deciding whether to give up entirely. That's where she first noticed him. A man in an expensive charcoal gray suit, sitting on the curb like he'd been placed there by mistake. Not stumbling drunk, not high, not shouting at invisible enemies. Just sitting with the kind of stillness that made him seem almost unreal in the chaos of the downpour. Renee had walked past that corner for 3 weeks straight, head down, earbuds in, following the first rule of city survival. Mind your business. She barely had enough bandwidth for her own problems. Her studio apartment had exactly 4 things in the fridge: eggs, bread, a jar of peanut butter that was mostly empty, and tap water in a reused bottle. Her student loans sent her reminder emails that felt like threats. Her mother called twice a week asking when the big corporate job would start paying real money. But on this night, a Thursday in late October, rain hammering down so hard it sounded like static, she'd stayed late organizing files in the mailroom because her supervisor had implied that initiative might lead to a permanent position after the internship ended. Better to seem indispensable, she'd thought, even if it meant missing the last express bus. The rain was the kind that soaked through clothes in seconds, turned streets into rivers, made umbrellas feel like cruel jokes. Renee's clear plastic umbrella, $15 from a sidewalk vendor, was the only thing between her and pneumonia. She was 10 feet past him when she stopped. Something about the way he sat there, legs extended, hand resting on his knee, blood mixing with rainwater and running down his wrist in thin ribbons. Something about the way his head tilted slightly to the side, like he was listening to music no one else could hear. Something about the expensive cut of that suit, now ruined, and the fact that no one else had stopped. Not the taxis splashing through puddles, not the few pedestrians hurrying past with their heads down, not even the figures she could barely make out in the fog behind him, men in dark suits holding black umbrellas, watching but not helping. Renee turned around. Her mother's voice echoed in her head, warning her about getting involved, about how the world wasn't kind to young black women who made themselves targets by caring too much. Her best friend's voice reminded her that people sitting on curbs bleeding at 11 p.m. probably deserved whatever had happened to them. Her own voice, the tired one that just wanted to go home and sleep, told her to keep walking, but her feet carried her back to the curb anyway. She knelt on the wet asphalt, feeling the cold water immediately soak through her only pair of work-appropriate slacks, the ones she'd bought on clearance and hand-washed in her bathroom sink every Sunday night. The man didn't look up, didn't acknowledge her at all. Up close, she could see the gash on his right temple, fresh and still bleeding, a dark smear across his cheekbone that the rain couldn't quite wash away. "Hey," Renee said softly, holding her umbrella over both of them. The rain drummed against the plastic like impatient fingers. "Can you hear me?" His eyes moved first, sharp and dark, focusing on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. Then his head lifted slowly, and she saw him fully late 20s, maybe early 30s, Korean, with the kind of bone structure that belonged in fashion magazines and eyes that belonged in police interrogation rooms. Cold, calculating, dangerous, even bleeding out on a street corner. But there was something else there, too. Surprise, like kindness was a language he'd forgotten people spoke. "I'm okay," he said quietly, his voice rough but steady, English accented but precise. "You should go." "You're bleeding." Renee set her umbrella down, angling it against her shoulder, and dug through her canvas work bag. Past the protein bars she hoarded from the break room, past the stack of manila folders she'd stolen to organize her own job applications, until her fingers found the small first aid kit she'd started carrying after a coworker had sliced her hand on a paper cutter and no one could find supplies. The man watched her with that same unnerving stillness. "You don't want to get involved in this." "Probably not," Renee admitted, pulling out antiseptic wipes and gauze pads. "But my mother raised me better than to leave someone bleeding in the rain, so here we are." She reached toward his temple, half expecting him to pull away, but he didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on her face, memorizing it. She realized, studying her like she was evidence in a crime scene. She pressed the gauze against the wound, and he didn't even flinch. "I'm not going to ask what happened," she whispered, her hand trembling slightly despite her best efforts to stay calm. The figures in the background had moved closer, she noticed in her peripheral vision. Watching, waiting. "But I'm not leaving you here to drown either." His hand came up, covering hers where it pressed the gauze against his temple. His fingers were cold and sticky with blood, but his grip was gentle. "What's your name?" She hesitated. Every instinct screamed that giving her name to a bleeding stranger surrounded by silent watchers was a mistake that would follow her. But something about the way he asked, not demanding, almost pleading, made her answer truthfully. "Renee. Renee Caswell." His eyes dropped to the ID badge hanging from her lanyard. That damning word intern in bold letters, the K-Corp logo gleaming even in the dim streetlight. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe. Or calculation. "Renee," he repeated, like he was committing it to memory. "Thank you." She secured the gauze with medical tape, her fingers working quickly despite the rain, making everything slippery. In the distance, sirens wailed, getting closer. The figures behind them tensed. "You should go," the man said again, more urgently this time. "Now." Renee looked at him. At the blood soaking through the fresh bandage. At the expensive suit that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. At the exhaustion and danger and something else, something almost like shame in his eyes. "Will you be okay?" she asked. He gave her a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I always am." Renee stood, her knees aching from kneeling on wet concrete, her slacks ruined beyond saving, her umbrella dripping rain down her back. She picked up her bag, looked one last time at the bleeding man on the curb, and walked away into the storm. She didn't see the way he watched her disappear into the rain. She didn't see the men in suits move forward as soon as she was out of sight. She didn't see the black SUVs pull up, or the way the man stood steady despite his injury and climbed into the back seat without looking back. She didn't know that by stopping, by breaking the city's cardinal rule, by showing kindness to a stranger, she had just changed the trajectory of her entire life. She didn't know that the man she'd saved wasn't some down-on-his-luck businessman. She didn't know that Yun-seo Park, heir to the most dangerous Korean Mafia syndicate in the city, never forgot a debt. And she definitely didn't know that K-Corp Tower, the building where she sorted mail and organized files and dreamed of a permanent position, was owned by the very empire he controlled. She just went home, peeled off her ruined clothes, and set her alarm for 6 a.m., because she had to be back at that same building in 7 hours, and interns who showed up late didn't get promoted. The next morning would bring answers she wasn't ready for. The next morning, everything would change. But that night, she just slept, dreamless and exhausted, while somewhere across the city, a ruthless man sat in a penthouse overlooking the financial district, a fresh bandage on his temple, and decided that the woman with the clear umbrella and the intern badge was worth protecting, even if she didn't know she needed protection yet. If you're enjoying this story so far, please subscribe, like, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and the time over there. Thank you for being here. The rain hit harder as Renee knelt beside him, each drop sounding like a tiny explosion against her umbrella. Up close, the man looked worse than she'd thought. The blood wasn't just from his temple, there was a split in his eyebrow too, and his knuckles were scraped raw like he'd been in a fight, or several fights. "Can you tell me your name?" Renee asked, digging through her first aid kit with one hand while holding the umbrella steady with the other. Her nursing textbooks had covered basic trauma assessment, even if she was studying accounting now instead. His eyes found hers, and for a moment she forgot about the rain, the blood, the watching figures in the fog. His gaze was the kind that pinned you in place, made you feel like you were the only person in the world worth looking at. Predatory, but not quite threatening. Not yet. "Yun-seo," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Park Yun-seo." "Okay, Yun-seo. I'm going to clean this wound. It might sting." She tore open an antiseptic wipe, the sharp smell of alcohol cutting through the rain. When she pressed it to his temple, he didn't even blink. Most people would have flinched, pulled away, cursed. He just watched her with that same unnerving intensity. "You're not afraid," he observed. "Not a question. An assessment." "I'm terrified," Renee admitted, dabbing at the blood. "But fear doesn't stop bleeding, so here we are." The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile, but not quite. Smart answer. She worked quickly, cleaning the wound as best she could in the downpour, applying antibiotic ointment from a tube that was probably expired but better than nothing. His eyes never left her face, and she was acutely aware of how close they were, how his expensive cologne mixed with the smell of rain and copper. "You work at K-Corp," he said, his eyes dropping to her badge again. Not a question this time either. "I'm an intern, bottom of the food chain." She pressed a large gauze pad over the wound, her fingers brushing against his wet hair. "How did you—" "The logo." He gestured weakly at her badge. "I know it well." Of course he did. Everyone in the financial district knew K-Corp. The glass tower dominated the skyline, housed everything from investment banking to international trade operations, and had a reputation for chewing through employees like a meat grinder. Renee had been lucky to get the internship at all, even if it paid barely enough to cover her rent. "Hold this," she instructed, guiding his hand to hold the gauze in place while she found medical tape. His fingers were ice cold, and she wondered how long he'd been sitting here before she found him. The sirens were getting closer now, their wail cutting through the rain. The figures in the fog shifted, and Renee felt the change in the air, tension crackling like electricity before a lightning strike. "Renee Caswell," Yun-seo said, reading her badge again. His pronunciation was perfect, deliberate. "You should leave now." "I'm almost done." "Now." His hand caught her wrist, gentle but firm. "They're coming, and you don't want to be here when they arrive." She looked into his eyes and saw something that made her blood run cold. Not fear, warning, like he was trying to protect her from something she couldn't see yet. "Will you get help?" she asked, even as she started packing up her first aid kit. "I'll be fine." He released her wrist, his fingers trailing across her palm in a way that felt deliberate. "Thank you, Renee Caswell. I won't forget this." The way he said it sounded less like gratitude and more like a promise, or a threat. She couldn't tell which. Renee stood, grabbed her bag, and walked away without looking back. Behind her, she heard car doors opening, voices speaking in rapid Korean, the sound of Yun-seo being helped to his feet. She turned the corner and broke into a run, her ruined slacks clinging to her legs, her heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't stop running until she reached her apartment building 6 blocks away. The alarm went off at 6 a.m., dragging Renee from a fitful sleep filled with dark eyes and watching figures in the fog. She groaned, slapping at her phone until the noise stopped, and lay there staring at her water-stained ceiling while her brain slowly came online. Last night felt like a fever dream. Had she really knelt in the rain to help a bleeding stranger? Had those men really been watching from the shadows? Had Yun-seo really looked at her like he was memorizing her face? Her ruined slacks draped over her shower curtain rod told her it had been real. Shit, she muttered, throwing off her thin blanket. She had exactly one other pair of work-appropriate pants, and they were in the laundry bag she hadn't had time to take to the laundromat. She dug through her closet, finally finding a pair of black slacks that were slightly too tight and had a small stain on the thigh that she covered with her bag when she sat down. By the time she'd gotten dressed, grabbed a granola bar that would serve as breakfast and lunch, and run to catch the bus, she was already 10 minutes behind schedule. The bus hit traffic. Construction on Fifth Avenue, a water main break on Lexington. By the time Renee burst through the revolving doors of K-Corp Tower, she was 45 minutes late and looked like she'd been dragged through a hedge backward. The security guard at the front desk, Marcus, who usually gave her a sympathetic nod when she came in early, looked at her with something close to pity. "Rough morning?" he asked. "You have no idea." Renee swiped her badge and headed for the elevators, already composing her apology to her supervisor in her head. The mailroom was in the basement, a windowless concrete bunker that smelled like toner and desperation. Renee shared the space with 3 other interns and their supervisor, Patricia Chen, a woman in her 50s who'd worked at K-Corp for 30 years and had the emotional range of a filing cabinet. Patricia was waiting by Renee's sorting station, arms crossed, mouth set in a thin line. "Miss Caswell, how kind of you to join us." "I'm so sorry, Patricia. The bus, I don't want to hear it." Patricia's voice could have frozen nitrogen. "This is the 3rd time this month you've been late. Do you think permanent positions go to people who can't show up on time?" Renee's stomach dropped. "It won't happen again." "You're right. It won't." Patricia pulled a yellow warning slip from her clipboard and thrust it at Renee. "One more infraction and you're done. We have 50 applicants who would kill for your position." Renee took the slip with trembling fingers, her face burning with shame and anger. Around her, the other interns kept their heads down, sorting mail with sudden, intense focus. Nobody wanted to be next. "Understood," Renee managed to say. "Good. Now get to work. The executive floor deliveries are already behind schedule." Renee spent the next 6 hours in a fog of humiliation and exhaustion, pushing her mail cart through the tower's 43 floors, delivering packages and inter-office envelopes to people who looked through her like she was invisible. Executive assistants didn't say thank you. Managers didn't make eye contact. She was furniture with a pulse, and everyone knew it. By lunch, her feet ached, and her stomach growled loud enough that a junior analyst smirked as she delivered his package. She ate her granola bar in the basement bathroom stall, perched on a toilet seat, wondering how much longer she could keep this up before she broke completely. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "How's my corporate star doing?" Renee stared at the message, then typed back, "Great. Living the dream." She deleted it before sending. Typed instead, "Busy day. Love you." The afternoon dragged on. More deliveries, more invisible corridors, more executives brushing past her without acknowledgement. By 5 p.m., when Patricia finally dismissed them, Renee felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped out her insides and left just enough to keep her walking. She was halfway to the elevators when Patricia called her back. "Caswell, one more thing." Renee turned, bracing for another lecture. Patricia's expression was strange, almost nervous. "Tomorrow morning, You're to report to the executive suite, 43rd floor, 7A, M, sharp. Renee blinked. The executive suite? Why? I don't ask questions above my pay grade, and neither should you. Just be there on time. Patricia paused. And wear something. Professional. More professional than this. She gestured vaguely at Renee's stained slacks and wrinkled blazer, then walked away before Renee could respond. The other interns exchanged glances, a mixture of curiosity and envy. Nobody got called to the executive suite. That was where the real power lived, where decisions that moved billions of dollars happened behind closed doors. Renee rode the bus home in a daze, her mind spinning through possibilities. Had she accidentally delivered something to the wrong person? Had someone complained about her? Was this how they fired people, summoning them to the top floor for a formal dismissal? She barely slept that night, staring at her ceiling and trying to remember if she'd done anything wrong, anything that would warrant attention from the people who lived in the clouds at the top of K-Corp Tower. She never once connected it to the bleeding man in the rain. Renee arrived at 7 a.m. Exactly, wearing her best blazer, the one she'd bought for her college graduation, and her least stained pair of slacks. She'd woken up at 5, spent an hour on her hair, and practiced her "I'm very interested in this opportunity" face in the bathroom mirror until she felt ridiculous. The 43rd floor was a different world. Marble floors instead of industrial carpet, real plants instead of dying succulents in plastic pots. The receptionist's desk was made of what looked like actual mahogany, and the woman behind it had the kind of bone structure that belonged on runways. "Renee Caswell," Renee said, her voice coming out smaller than she intended. "I was told to report here at 7. The receptionist, her nameplate read, Sophia Kim, looked her up and down with the kind of assessment that made Renee feel like she was being priced and found wanting. "Wait here." Sophia picked up a phone, spoke in rapid Korean, then hung up and gestured toward a row of leather chairs that probably cost more than Renee's entire apartment. "Someone will collect you shortly." Renee sat, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap like her mother had taught her. Around her, executives moved with purpose, carrying tablets and coffee cups, speaking in low voices about markets and acquisitions and strategy. Nobody looked at her. She was still invisible, even 43 floors up. The other interns started arriving at 7:15, a line of them looking equally confused and terrified. Renee recognized most of them mailroom workers, filing clerks, the coffee service intern who always smelled like espresso. They clustered together in the waiting area, whispering theories. "I heard someone's getting promoted. I heard someone's getting fired for stealing. I heard the chairman is back from Korea." That last comment made several people go quiet. The chairman was a legend at K-Corp, a figure spoken about in hushed tones. He'd been gone for 6 months, nobody knew exactly why, and his absence had created a power vacuum that had the whole company on edge. At 7:30 exactly, a door opened and a man in an immaculate black suit stepped out. He was Korean, probably in his 40s, with silver-framed glasses and the kind of presence that made everyone stand up straighter. "Interns," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the space. "Form a line. The chairman will see you now." They scrambled into formation, a messy line of nervous 20-somethings trying not to look terrified. Renee ended up in the middle, between a guy from IT and the coffee intern whose hands were shaking so badly her pen rattled against her clipboard. The man in the black suit, nobody had introduced him, but he moved like someone who didn't need introduction, led them down a corridor lined with abstract art that probably cost more than Renee would earn in her lifetime. They stopped in front of a set of double doors, dark wood with brushed steel handles. "When the chairman enters, you will bow," the man instructed. "You will not speak unless spoken to. You will address him as Chairman Park or Sir. Is this understood? A chorus of, "Yes, sir," rippled through the line. The doors opened. The conference room beyond was massive, all glass walls and sweeping views of the city. A table that could seat 30 dominated the center, and at the far end, silhouetted against the morning sun, stood a figure Renee couldn't quite make out. They filed in, the line reforming along one wall. Renee found herself between the IT intern and a guy from legal services who looked like he might pass out. Footsteps echoed across the marble floor. The silhouette moved, stepping out of the sun's glare. Renee's heart stopped. It was him, the man from the rain, Yun-seo. He wore a black suit that fit him like it had been created specifically for his body, a white shirt with no tie, and an expression that could have been carved from ice. His hair was styled back from his face, and there on his right temple was a neat white bandage that stood out stark against his skin. He walked down the line slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes assessing each intern with the same intensity he'd used to memorize Renee's face in the rain. People bowed as he passed. Some of them were shaking. Renee's mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The man she'd helped the bleeding stranger on the curb was the chairman? Was Yun-seo Park? The person who owned this entire tower? He stopped in front of the IT intern next to her, looked him up and down, moved on. Then he was in front of Renee. Their eyes met, and the world narrowed to just the two of them. She saw recognition flash across his face, immediate and absolute, followed by something that might have been satisfaction. "Miss Caswell," he said quietly, his voice the same as it had been in the rain, but somehow colder now, more controlled. "We meet again." Every intern in the line turned to stare at her. The man in the black suit, his assistant, Renee realized, stepped forward slightly, as if expecting trouble. "Sir," Renee managed to say, her throat dry. Yun-seo's eyes dropped to her ID badge, that damning intern label, then back to her face. Interesting. He moved on, finishing his inspection of the line, but Renee could feel his attention still on her like a physical weight. Her heart hammered so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. When he reached the end of the line, Yun-seo turned to face them all. "Most of you will return to your regular duties. A few of you will be reassigned based on performance reviews and departmental needs. You'll be notified by end of day." He paused, his eyes finding Renee again across the room. "Miss Caswell, you'll stay." The other interns filed out, shooting her looks that ranged from envy to pity. The coffee intern grabbed her arm as she passed, whispering, "Good luck," like Renee was heading to her execution. Then it was just Renee, Yun-seo, and the man in the black suit who stood by the door like a sentinel. Yun-seo walked to the head of the conference table and gestured to a chair. "Sit." Renee sat, her legs feeling like they might give out anyway. He took the chair at the head of the table, close enough that she could see the fine stitches at the edge of his bandage, far enough that the distance felt deliberate. "You helped me 2 nights ago," he said. "Not a question. A statement of fact. In the rain. When I was injured. Yes, sir." "Do you know who I am?" "I do now." Renee's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Chairman Park, you own K-Corp. I own many things." He leaned back in his chair, studying her with that same predatory focus. "Tell me, Miss Caswell, why did you stop?" "I'm sorry." "In the rain. You were walking home, late at night, dangerous area. You saw a bleeding stranger, and instead of walking past like everyone else, you stopped. You knelt in the mud. You used your own supplies to help me." "Why?" Renee met his eyes, refusing to look away even though every instinct screamed at her to drop her gaze. "Because you needed help. That's it? No ulterior motive? No recognition of who I might be? I had no idea who you were. You were just someone who was hurt. Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile, but a softening around his eyes. Interesting. The man by the door cleared his throat. "Sir, we have the board meeting in 20 minutes. Cancel it." Yun-seo didn't look away from Renee. "Miss Caswell, as of this moment, you are no longer an intern. You are my executive assistant. Your salary will be commensurate with the position. I believe it will be a significant improvement over your current arrangement." Renee blinked. Sure, she'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "You'll report directly to me. Your duties will include managing my schedule, organizing my files, handling confidential correspondence, and accompanying me to meetings as needed. You'll start immediately." I can't. I'm not qualified. I'm just an intern." "Yes, I'm aware." Yun-seo stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. "But you're also someone who showed me kindness when I was vulnerable, who didn't ask questions or demand something in return, who risked her own safety for a stranger. Those qualities are more valuable to me than any MBA." Renee's head spun. This didn't make sense. Executive assistants to the chairman were usually people with decades of experience, impeccable connections, unshakable loyalty. She was a girl from Brooklyn with a community college degree and dreams she'd almost stopped believing in. "Sir, I appreciate the offer, but it's not an offer." His voice went cold, sharp as broken glass. "It's a reassignment. You start today." "But I don't." "Miss Caswell." He leaned forward, his hands flat on the table, his face close enough that she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "2 nights ago, you became visible to people you don't want to be visible to. The men who were watching us in the rain, they saw you help me. They know your face now. They know your name. And they will use that information in ways that will put you in danger." Renee's blood turned to ice. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that by showing me kindness, you painted a target on your back." His voice softened slightly, almost apologetic. "The safest place for you now is where I can see you, where my people can protect you. Do you understand?" She understood. She understood that her simple act of compassion had somehow dragged her into something dark and complicated. She understood that this man, this chairman, wasn't offering her a promotion out of gratitude, but out of necessity. She understood that she'd been right to be terrified. "What if I quit?" she asked quietly. "What if I just walk away from K-Corp entirely? Then you'll be walking away without protection, and the people who saw you helping me will find you anyway, because they won't believe you don't know something valuable. They'll assume I told you things, gave you information, made you important." He straightened up. "At least here, you have a chance." Renee closed her eyes, feeling the walls closing in. This morning, she'd been an invisible intern worried about being fired for showing up late. Now she was being forced into a position of power and danger because she'd stopped to help a bleeding stranger. "Do I have a choice?" she asked. "Everyone has a choice, Miss Caswell, but some choices have better survival rates than others." She opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked at him. Past the expensive suit and the cold demeanor and the bandage on his temple, she saw exhaustion in the lines around his eyes. She saw something almost like regret in the set of his mouth. She saw a man who lived in a world where kindness was currency and debts were paid in blood. "Fine," she said. "I'll do it." "Good." Yun-seo straightened. "All business again. Min-jun will show you to your new office. Your belongings from the mailroom will be collected and brought up. You'll need a new badge, new security clearance, new access codes. We'll arrange all of that today." The man by the door, Min-jun, apparently stepped forward and gave her a small nod. "One more thing," Yun-seo said as she stood to leave. "Thank you. For the rain. I don't say that often." Renee looked back at him. This dangerous man who she'd saved without knowing what she was saving. "You're welcome, I think." As she followed Min-jun out of the conference room, She heard Yun-seo's quiet laugh behind her. It sounded almost human. Her new office was 3 doors down from Yun-seo's, a space that would have fit her entire apartment inside with room to spare. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the financial district. A massive desk made of dark wood dominated the center, and there were actual books on actual shelves instead of the motivational posters that covered the mailroom walls. "Your computer will be set up within the hour," Min-jun said, his tone professional but not unkind. "It will need to create new credentials for you. HR will need updated paperwork, and you'll need to sign several NDAs." "NDAs?" Renee's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Non-disclosure agreements. Everything you see, hear, or learn in this position is confidential. Violation of these agreements carries severe legal consequences." He paused. "I should also mention that your predecessor lasted 3 years before requesting a transfer to our Singapore office. This is not an easy position." "What happened to them?" "Nothing dramatic. They simply burned out. The chairman is demanding." That seemed like an understatement. Renee walked to the window, looking down at the city spread below her. Somewhere down there was her old life, the cramped apartment, the struggling budget, the simple dream of making enough money to help her family. That life felt impossibly far away now, like looking down from an airplane. "What exactly does he do?" she asked. "I mean, I know he runs K-Corp, but what else?" Min-jun was quiet for a long moment. When she turned back, his expression was carefully neutral. "The chairman's business interests are diverse and complex. It's not my place to explain them. You'll learn what you need to know as you go." Which was not an answer at all. The day became a blur of paperwork, security briefings, and IT setup. People came and went from her office, HR representatives with contracts to sign, security personnel who took her photo for a new badge, even someone from facilities management who asked about her preferences for office supplies. Everyone treated her with a careful respect that felt wrong, like they were scared to offend her now that she worked for the chairman directly. By noon, Renee's head throbbed and her stomach felt like it was eating itself. She hadn't had breakfast, and lunch seemed like a luxury from another life. Min-jun appeared in her doorway. "The chairman would like you to join him for lunch." "Executive dining room, 5th floor." Of course, because this day wasn't surreal enough already. The executive dining room was exactly as pretentious as Renee imagined. White tablecloths, actual waiters, a menu that didn't list prices because if you needed to ask, you didn't belong there. Yun-seo sat at a corner table by the windows, reading something on a tablet, a cup of black coffee steaming beside him. He looked up when she approached, gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit. Have you eaten?" "Not yet." "Order whatever you want." He went back to his tablet, scrolling through what looked like financial reports. The waiter appeared instantly, and Renee ordered the first thing she saw, some kind of salmon dish that probably cost what she used to spend on groceries for a week. They ate in silence for a while. Yun-seo seemed content to ignore her, focused on his work. Renee picked at her salmon, her appetite gone, her mind spinning through everything that had happened. "You're wondering why I really promoted you," Yun-seo said without looking up from his tablet. Renee set down her fork. "The thought crossed my mind. I told you the truth. You're in danger now because you helped me. But that's not the only reason." He looked at her finally, his expression unreadable. "I need someone I can trust. Someone who doesn't have existing loyalties to anyone else in this company. Someone who proved they're capable of making good decisions under pressure. You're trusting me because I bandaged your head? I'm trusting you because when you had every reason to walk away, you didn't." He set down his tablet. "Do you know how rare that is in my world? Real kindness with no agenda?" Renee thought about the men in the fog, the watching figures with black umbrellas. About the way he'd said some choices have better survival rates than others. about the casual way he'd mentioned protection, like violence was just another business expense. "What exactly is your world?" she asked quietly. Yun-seo smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "One you should have stayed out of. But since you're in it now, you might as well understand the rules." He leaned back in his chair, coffee cup in hand, and for the next 20 minutes, he explained how K-Corp was the legitimate face of an empire built on less legitimate foundations. How the Korean syndicate he'd inherited from his father controlled everything from shipping to real estate to information brokerage. How the corporate boardrooms were just another battlefield, cleaner than street corners but just as deadly. "There are people who want me dead," he said matter-of-factly. "People within my own organization who think I'm too young, too Western-educated, too soft. The attack 2 nights ago was the 3rd attempt this year." Renee felt sick. "And you're telling me this because you need to know what you're protecting me from, and what I'm protecting you from." He set down his cup. "Your job is to manage my schedule and organize my files. But what you're really doing is watching, listening, noticing patterns. You told me you were just an intern, but I had your background checked this morning. You studied forensic accounting before you switched to business management. You're good with numbers. Better than good." She stared at him. "You had me investigated?" "I investigate everyone who gets close to me. It's how I stay alive." He pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. "These are the files currently in my office. They're a mess because my last assistant organized them by date instead of by project, and nobody's had time to fix it. I need you to go through them, reorganize them logically, and flag anything that looks unusual." Renee opened the folder. Inside were copies of financial reports, contracts, transaction records, all jumbled together without clear organization. Her accountant's brain immediately started sorting them into categories, seeing patterns in the chaos. "What am I looking for exactly?" "Anything that doesn't make sense. Missing money, duplicate payments, accounts that don't match up." His eyes locked on hers. "I think someone inside K-Corp is stealing from me. I need proof. Why not hire a professional forensic accountant?" "Because professionals can be bought. You can't." He stood, buttoning his jacket. "You owe me nothing except the truth. That makes you more valuable than you realize." He left her there with the folder, the half-eaten salmon, and a growing sense that she'd agreed to something far more complicated than being an executive assistant. Yun-seo's office was organized chaos. Files stacked on every surface, contracts spread across the desk, sticky notes covering his computer monitor like a paper plague. Renee stood in the doorway, her accountant's soul dying a little at the mess. "He wants me to organize this?" she muttered to herself. "He wants you to find the rat," said a voice behind her. Renee turned to find Min-jun standing there, his expression unreadable behind his silver-framed glasses. "I'm sorry?" "The chairman believes someone is embezzling. Someone close to him. Someone who knows how to hide their tracks." Min-jun stepped into the office, his eyes scanning the chaos with practiced efficiency. "Your job is to find them before they do more damage. I'm not a detective." "No. You're an accountant who knows how to read numbers that don't want to be read." He picked up one of the files, flipped through it. These files contain 3 years of transaction records, hundreds of accounts, thousands of transactions. Most people would see noise. The chairman believes you'll see patterns. Renee walked to the desk, looking at the scattered papers. Numbers jumped out at her: dates, amounts, account codes. Already her brain was sorting, categorizing, looking for inconsistencies. "Where do I start?" "Wherever the numbers take you." Min-jun set down the file. "But be careful, Miss Caswell. If someone is stealing from the chairman, they won't appreciate you finding proof." He left her alone in the chaos. Renee took off her blazer, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. She started with the basics, sorting files by department, then by date, then by type of transaction. It took hours, but slowly a system emerged from the mess. Accounting on the left, legal contracts in the middle, investment portfolios on the right. Then she started actually reading the numbers. Most of it was standard corporate finance, payroll, operating expenses, vendor payments. But there were irregularities. Small ones, easy to miss. A payment to a consulting firm that didn't seem to provide any actual services. Transfer to an account that showed up in multiple departments under different names. Expenses that were just slightly too round, too convenient, too frequent. By 6 p.m., Renee's eyes burned and her back ached, but she'd found a pattern. Money was being moved small amounts, spread across dozens of accounts in a way that looked random unless you knew what to look for. And it was all flowing toward a single offshore account registered under a shell corporation. She pulled up the registration documents for the shell corporation, cross-referenced them with K-Corp's board of directors, and felt her stomach drop. The corporation was registered to someone named James Park. A quick search of K-Corp's organizational chart showed James Park as the chief operating officer, Yun-seo's uncle. Renee sat back in her chair, staring at the evidence spread across the desk. The man who'd been running K-Corp while Yun-seo was in Korea. The man who'd overseen operations for the past 6 months. The man who was supposed to be Yun-seo's most trusted advisor. He was stealing. Systematically. Carefully. And probably had been for years. Find something interesting. Renee nearly jumped out of her skin. Yun-seo stood in the doorway, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up, looking almost human for once. How long have you been standing there? Long enough to see you make 6 stacks, destroy 3, and rebuild them differently. He walked into the office, looking at her organization system with something like approval. You found it. Found what? The proof. He picked up one of the files she'd flagged, scanning the contents. My uncle, James Park. He's the one stealing from me. Renee nodded slowly. The numbers don't lie. He's been moving money through shell corporations for at least 3 years. Small amounts, spread out to avoid detection, but it adds up to millions. $7,300,000. Yun-seo's voice was flat, emotionless. Give or take. You already knew, I suspected. You confirmed it. He set down the file and looked at her with something that might have been respect. You did in 8 hours what my last assistant couldn't do in 6 months. Impressive, Miss Caswell. What happens now? Now? Yun-seo smiled, and it was cold enough to freeze blood. Now we prepare for war. Because my uncle isn't just stealing money. He's building a power base to take control of everything I've built. He walked to the window, looking out at the city lights below. The attack 2 nights ago? My uncle ordered it. He wanted me dead before I could find proof of his theft. You saved my life in that rain, Renee. But more than that, you gave me time to find the evidence I needed to destroy him. Renee felt the weight of it settling on her shoulders. She hadn't just saved a man's life. She'd saved an empire. And in doing so, she'd made herself part of a war she didn't fully understand. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Good. Yun-seo turned back to face her. Fear keeps you sharp. Fear keeps you alive. He walked toward the door, then paused. Go home, Renee. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start planning how to survive this. Wait. She stood, her legs shaky. What you said at lunch. About people wanting you dead. About this being dangerous. Was any of that exaggerated? He looked at her for a long moment, his expression softening just slightly. No. Every word was true. You're in danger now. Real danger. But I promise you this while you work for me. I will keep you safe. That's not a business arrangement. That's a debt I owe you. Then he was gone, leaving Renee alone in the organized chaos of his office, surrounded by evidence of betrayal and theft, wondering how a simple act of kindness in the rain had led her here. She looked out the window at the city 43 floors below, at the lights and the movement and the life she'd almost had. Then she looked at the files on the desk, the proof of corruption that could bring down an empire or save it. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Proud of you, baby. I know you're working hard," Renee typed back. "You have no idea." She grabbed her bag, turned off the lights, and headed home to her small apartment that felt even smaller now that she'd spent the day in an office bigger than most houses. Tomorrow, she'd come back. Tomorrow, she'd continue being Yun-seo's assistant, his protector, his detective. Tomorrow, she'd try to survive in a world where kindness was currency and betrayal ran in families. But tonight, she just wanted to sleep without dreaming of dark eyes and watching figures in the rain. The parking garage was nearly empty at 8 p.m., just a scattering of luxury cars belonging to executives who worked late or pretended to. Renee's footsteps echoed off concrete as she walked toward the visitor section where she'd been parking. Since her promotion, her ancient Honda looked embarrassingly out of place among the Mercedes and BMWs, but at least it still ran. She was digging through her bag for her keys when she heard footsteps behind her. "Miss Caswell. Working late?" Renee turned to find a man in his 50s approaching, his smile warm and his suit expensive. He had the kind of face that inspired trust, gentle eyes, laugh lines, silver hair styled perfectly. She recognized him from the organizational charts she'd been studying. James Park, the uncle, the thief. "Mr. Park." She kept her voice steady, professional. "Just heading home, please. Call me James." He stopped a respectful distance away, hands in his pockets, the picture of casual friendliness. "I've been meaning to introduce myself. You're Yun-seo's new assistant, yes? Quite a promotion from the mailroom. Congratulations. Thank you. You must be very talented. My nephew doesn't trust easily." His smile never wavered, but something in his eyes made Renee's skin crawl. "Tell me, how are you finding the position? Not too overwhelming, I hope? It's challenging, but I'm managing." "I'm sure you are." He took a step closer, still casual, still friendly. "You know, I've been with K-Corp for 30 years. I helped build this company from the ground up. I watched Yun-seo grow from a boy into the man he is today. I know him better than anyone." Renee's fingers found her keys, gripping them tight enough that the metal bit into her palm. "That's nice. What I'm saying is, if you ever need guidance, if you ever find yourself confused about your role or uncertain about decisions being made, my door is always open." He moved closer still, close enough that she could smell his cologne expensive, cloying. The corporate world can be treacherous for young people, especially young people who don't understand the complexities of family dynamics. There it was. The threat wrapped in concern, the warning dressed as mentorship. "I appreciate that," Renee said carefully, "but I'm doing fine. Are you?" His smile thinned slightly. "Because from where I stand, you've been given access to sensitive files, financial records, information that could be easily misinterpreted by someone without the proper context." He paused, his eyes boring into hers. "It would be unfortunate if you drew incorrect conclusions that could damage relationships, create unnecessary conflict." Renee's heart hammered, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm just organizing files, Mr. Park. That's all." Of course. Of course." He stepped back, the warm smile returning. "I'm simply saying that loyalty is everything in our world. And loyalty means understanding that sometimes numbers tell only part of the story. Sometimes there are legitimate reasons for transactions that might seem irregular to an untrained eye. I understand completely." "Good. Good." He pulled out his business card, pressed it into her hand. "My personal number, if you ever need advice, guidance, or just someone to talk to about the pressures of your new position. Anytime, day, or night." Renee took the card with fingers that trembled slightly. "Thank you. One more thing." His voice dropped, losing all pretense of warmth. My nephew can be intense, single-minded. He sees betrayal everywhere, even where it doesn't exist. If he's asked you to look for something specific in those files, I'd be very interested to know what that is. He hasn't asked me to look for anything. No? James studied her face like he was reading a contract. Well, if that changes, remember my offer. There are always two sides to every story, Miss Caswell. And sometimes the people we think we should trust are the ones most likely to get us killed. He walked away, his footsteps echoing off the concrete, leaving Renee standing alone beside her car with her heart racing and his business card burning in her hand. She sat in her Honda for 10 minutes, doors locked, breathing slowly until her hands stopped shaking. He knew. James Park knew she'd found the evidence. And that threat, disguised as friendly advice, was clear. Stop looking, or there would be consequences. Renee started her car and drove home, checking her rearview mirror every 30 seconds, half expecting to see headlights following her. The whole way, James Park's words echoed in her head. Sometimes the people we think we should trust are the ones most likely to get us killed. She didn't know if he meant Yun-seo or himself. Her apartment felt different when she got home. Nothing obvious, the door was still locked. Her few belongings still in their usual places, but something in the air felt wrong, like someone had been there while she was gone, touching her things, violating her space. Renee stood in the doorway, her keys still in her hand, every instinct screaming at her to leave. But this was her home, her safe place. She stepped inside, flipped on the lights, and tried to tell herself she was being paranoid. The living room looked normal, kitchen untouched, bathroom door closed like she'd left it. Her bedroom was at the end of the short hallway. The door was open just a crack, and she was almost certain she'd closed it this morning. Renee's phone was in her hand before she consciously decided to call. Not 911. Not her mother. The number Yun-seo had programmed into her contacts that afternoon. Chairman. Emergency. It rang once before he answered. Renee? Something's wrong. Her voice came out as a whisper. My apartment. Someone's been here. Get out. Now. I think. Now, Renee. Walk out of your apartment and get to a public place. I'm sending Minjun to get you. She backed toward the door, her eyes still on that cracked open bedroom door. That's when she saw it, a shadow moving inside her room. Not her imagination. Not paranoia. Someone was in there. Renee ran. She made it to the hallway outside her apartment before she heard her door slam open behind her. Footsteps pounding after her. She didn't look back, just ran for the stairs the elevator would trap her, taking them two at a time, while her breath came in gasps and her phone pressed to her ear. They're chasing me, she managed to say into the phone. Where are you? Yun-seo's voice was sharp, controlled. Stairwell. Building lobby. I don't... She burst through the lobby door and nearly collided with Minjun, who caught her by the shoulders, steadying her. Behind him were two other men in black suits, their expressions flat and dangerous. Inside, Minjun said, guiding her toward a black SUV idling at the curb. The two men moved past her, heading for the building entrance with the kind of purposeful stride that meant violence was about to happen. Renee let herself be pushed into the SUV's back seat. Minjun slid in beside her, and the vehicle pulled away before her door was even fully closed. Are you hurt? He asked. She shook her head, unable to speak yet. Her whole body was shaking, adrenaline making her feel like she was vibrating out of her skin. The chairman is waiting for you. Minjun handed her a bottle of water. Drink. Breathe. You're safe now. They drove through the city in silence, Renee pressing her forehead against the cool window glass, trying to process what had just happened. Someone had broken into her apartment. Someone had been waiting for her. If she hadn't called Yun-seo, if she'd walked into that bedroom. The SUV pulled into an underground garage beneath a building Renee didn't recognize. They took a private elevator that required a keycard and a fingerprint scan, rising smoothly through floors marked with letters instead of numbers. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse. Renee stepped out into a space that redefined luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. Minimalist furniture that probably cost more than her annual salary. Art on the walls that belonged in museums. And in the center of it all, standing by those massive windows with a phone pressed to his ear, was Yun-seo. He turned when she entered, said something sharp in Korean, and ended the call. "You're okay." Not a question. A statement, like he needed to confirm it for himself. "I think so." Renee's voice sounded distant. "What's happening?" "Sit." He guided her to a leather couch that felt like sitting on a cloud. "Minjun, get her something stronger than water." Minjun disappeared, and Yun-seo sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, smell the faint scent of his cologne mixed with coffee and stress. "My uncle moved faster than I expected," he said quietly. "You confronted him in the parking garage?" "He confronted me." "How did you—" "I have cameras everywhere." "I saw the interaction." His jaw tightened. "I should have warned you he'd approach directly. I underestimated his boldness. He threatened me. Subtly, but it was definitely a threat. And then he sent people to your apartment to make sure you understood the consequences of not listening." Yun-seo's hands clenched into fists. "This is my fault. I put you in danger. You warned me it was dangerous. I chose to stay. You didn't choose this." He stood, pacing to the windows. "You saved my life in the rain because you're a good person. You didn't ask to be dragged into a succession war. You didn't ask to have assassins in your apartment." Minjun returned with a glass of amber liquid whiskey, probably expensive enough to pay Renee's old rent. She took it with shaking hands and drank, the burn in her throat grounding her. "So what now?" she asked. "I can't go home. I can't exactly check into a hotel, and I'm guessing your uncle won't just forget about me. You stay here." Yun-seo turned from the windows. "This building has the best security in the city. 24-hour guards, biometric locks, panic rooms. My uncle can't reach you here. I can't just move into your penthouse." "You can and you will. At least until this is resolved." He came back to the couch, sat close enough that their knees almost touched. "I have guest rooms. Plural. You'll have privacy, but you'll be safe." Renee looked around the penthouse, at the luxury that felt like a different planet from her studio apartment. "How long? However long it takes to neutralize the threat." "You mean kill your uncle?" Yun-seo's expression went carefully blank. "I mean, remove him from power. Permanently. What that looks like depends on how cooperative he chooses to be." They sat in silence for a moment, the city lights twinkling below them like a field of stars. Renee finished her whiskey, feeling the warmth spread through her chest, loosening the tight knot of fear. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "You could have hired professional bodyguards, forensic accountants, people who know how to handle this kind of thing. Why drag a mailroom intern into your war? Because you're not part of this world. Because you showed me kindness without agenda. Because every single person in my organization has ulterior motives except you." He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, the mask cracked completely. "Do you know what it's like to trust no one? To go through every day wondering which smile hides a knife? To sleep with one eye open because even your own family wants you dead? No. It's exhausting. It's lonely. It's—" He trailed off, looking away. "And then you knelt in the rain and bandaged my head and asked for nothing in return. You were real. You are real. In a world full of people playing roles, you're the only genuine thing I've found." Renee's breath caught. There was vulnerability in his eyes now, raw and painful to see. This wasn't the ruthless chairman or the calculating Mafia heir. This was just Yun-seo, tired and isolated and desperately clinging to the one person who'd treated him like a human being. "I'm scared," she admitted. "But I'm also angry. Your uncle threatened me. He invaded my home. And I'm tired of being invisible, of being pushed around by people who think I don't matter." "You matter." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "You matter more than you know." The moment stretched between them, electric and dangerous in a different way than assassins and betrayal. Renee could feel her heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "Guest rooms," she said finally, pulling back before she did something stupid like kiss him. "You mentioned plural guest rooms." Yun-seo smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. "Second floor. Take your pick. Minjun will arrange for clothes and toiletries to be delivered tomorrow. I don't have anything with me. You will by morning. We'll also send someone to pack up your apartment, move your belongings here or into storage. Whatever you prefer." Renee stood, suddenly exhausted to her bones. "This is insane." "Welcome to my world." He stood too, walked her to the stairs. "Renee? Thank you. For not running when you had the chance. Don't thank me yet. We still have to survive this. We will. I promise you that." She climbed the stairs to the guest rooms, palatial spaces with king-sized beds and attached bathrooms bigger than her entire apartment, and collapsed onto the closest bed, still wearing her work clothes. Through the windows, the city glittered below, beautiful and dangerous, and full of people who wanted her dead for the crime of being kind. But for the first time since the parking garage, she felt safe, protected. And maybe, just maybe, not quite so alone in the chaos. Morning came with coffee delivered by a staff member Renee hadn't known existed, a woman in her 40s named Hannah who smiled warmly and informed her that breakfast would be ready in 20 minutes. The promised clothes had arrived. A whole wardrobe of professional attire in her exact size, from suits to casual wear to things that definitely were not appropriate for the office. Renee showered in the bathroom with its rainfall showerhead and heated floors, dressed in one of the new suits, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, and went downstairs to find Yun-seo already working at the dining table, laptop open, phone on speaker. He looked up when she entered, ended his call with a quick farewell in Korean. "You found everything?" "This is too much. The clothes, it's necessary. You can't go back to your apartment, which means you need clothes. Consider it a work expense." He gestured to the breakfast spread that could have fed 10 people. "Eat. We have work to do." Renee filled a plate with fruit and pastries, poured coffee from a carafe that probably cost more than her old car. "What kind of work?" Proving my uncle's guilt in a way that can't be refuted or covered up. You found the digital evidence, but digital can be explained away, claimed as fabricated. He pulled up a document on his laptop, turned it so she could see. These are the physical ledgers. Old school. Handwritten records that my uncle keeps in a safe in his office. They'll have the real numbers, the ones that match the offshore accounts. You want to steal from your own building. I prefer the term retrieve stolen property. But yes, he smiled grimly. The company gala is in 3 days. Everyone will be there, including my uncle. His office will be empty. His safe will be accessible. You know how to crack a safe? I know people who know people. But I need someone to actually retrieve the ledgers, photograph them, and return them without anyone noticing. Someone my uncle wouldn't suspect. He looked at her meaningfully. Someone invisible. Renee set down her coffee cup. You want me to break into your uncle's office during the biggest social event of the year. I want you to walk into my uncle's office, open his safe using the code I'll provide, photograph the contents, and walk out. You'll be wearing catering staff uniform. No one looks at servers. This is insane. This is survival. Yun-seo closed his laptop. My uncle is planning to move against me at the gala. I have sources who say he's bringing in outside players, people who will make my death look like natural causes, heart attack, stroke, something plausible for a young man under stress. So you're walking into a trap. I'm walking into an opportunity. If I can expose his theft publicly, in front of the board and the shareholders and the media, I can destroy his credibility before he destroys me. His eyes found hers. But I need proof. Real, undeniable proof. Renee thought about James Park in the parking garage, his friendly threats and calculating eyes. About the shadow in her bedroom, the footsteps chasing her down the stairs. About how she'd gone from invisible intern to key player in a corporate war in less than a week. If I do this, she said slowly, I need to know everything. No more half-truths. No more protecting me by keeping me ignorant. I need to understand exactly what I'm risking my life for. Yun-seo nodded. Fair enough. For the next 2 hours, he explained. How his father had built the syndicate from nothing, combining legitimate business with less legitimate ventures. How Yun-seo had been groomed to take over, sent to Harvard for business school, taught the Western way of doing things while maintaining Korean traditions. How his father's death 6 months ago had created a power vacuum that his uncle had been trying to fill. My father trusted James, Yun-seo said quietly. Made him COO, gave him access to everything. And James used that access to build his own empire inside ours, stealing money to fund his own operations, positioning himself to take control when I was vulnerable. The attack in the rain was supposed to kill me. James hired local thugs, told them I'd stolen from them, gave them my location. They beat me badly enough that I should have died on that curb. He touched the bandage on his temple still there, though the wound beneath must be healing. But you stopped to help. You kept me alive long enough for my people to find me. So I ruined his plan. You saved me. There's a difference. He reached across the table, took her hand. And now we're going to return the favor. We're going to save everything my father built. Renee looked at their joined hands, at the contrast of his skin against hers, at the way his fingers held hers like she was something precious. 3 days until the gala. 3 days to prepare. Minjun will train you on the security systems, the layout of James's office, the timing you'll need to pull this off, and I'll make sure everyone believes you're just there as my date. Your date? Cover story. The chairman's new girlfriend. Arm candy who'll stand beside him looking pretty while the real players conduct business. His smile was wicked. Think you can manage looking decorative? I'll do my best not to embarrass you. Renee. He squeezed her hand. You could never embarrass me. You're the bravest person I know. She didn't feel brave. She felt terrified and in over her head and like she was about to do something monumentally stupid. But she also felt alive in a way she never had. Sorting mail in a basement, invisible and ignored. Okay, she said. Let's steal some ledgers. The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. Minjun walked her through K-Corp's security systems, showing her the blind spots in the cameras, the timing of guard rotations, the maintenance corridors that connected different parts of the building. A woman named Sujin taught her how to pick a lock, just in case the code doesn't work, and how to photograph documents quickly without flash. Yun-seo himself briefed her on his uncle's habits, the layout of his office, what the ledgers would look like. Red leather binding, he said, showing her a photograph. His initials embossed in gold. He's vain that way. They practiced the timing. Renee would arrive at the gala as Yun-seo's date, spend exactly 30 minutes being seen by everyone important, then excuse herself to fix her makeup. The catering uniform would be stashed in a maintenance closet. She'd change, walk through the service corridors to James's office, retrieve the ledgers, photograph them, return them, change back, and rejoin the party. 20 minutes. That's all the window they had before someone noticed her absence. The night before the gala, Renee couldn't sleep. She lay in the guest room's enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was about to die in an expensive dress while committing corporate espionage. A knock on her door made her jump. "It's me," Yun-seo's voice, quiet through the wood. She opened the door to find him in pajama pants and a t-shirt, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. "Can't sleep either." "No." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of uncertainty that seemed foreign on him. "Can I come in?" She stepped back, and he entered, going to the windows that overlooked the sleeping city. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I'm sending you into danger tomorrow," he said finally. "If something goes wrong, if James discovers what you're doing, then I improvise. Or I run. Or your people extract me. We've been over this." "I know. But that doesn't make it easier." He turned to face her. "You could still walk away. I could give you money, set you up somewhere far from here. Make sure you're safe. You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." Renee moved closer to him. "Because your uncle threatened me. Because he tried to have me killed. Because I'm tired of being the person things happen to instead of the person who makes things happen. You're extraordinary. You know that. I'm terrified. That's what makes you extraordinary. You're terrified, and you're doing it anyway." He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek with heartbreaking gentleness. "When this is over, when James is gone and the company is secure, I'm going to take you to dinner. Somewhere normal, where we're just two people who met in the rain. That sounds nice." "It's a promise." His thumb traced her jawline. "Renee Caswell, you walked into my life at exactly the moment I needed someone real. Someone good. Someone worth protecting and worth fighting for." She could feel the moment building between them, electric and inevitable. "Yun-seo." He kissed her. Soft at first, questioning, giving her space to pull away. But Renee didn't pull away. She leaned into him, her hands finding his shirt, his arms wrapping around her waist, and for a few perfect moments, there was no danger, no schemes, no Gala waiting to explode their lives. There was just this, just them, just the connection that had been building since she'd knelt in the rain and shown kindness to a stranger. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Yun-seo rested his forehead against hers. Tomorrow we win," Renee finished. "We get the evidence, we expose your uncle, and we survive. Together. Together." He left her room a few minutes later, and Renee finally slept, her dreams full of dark eyes and gentle hands and the promise of a future where she wasn't invisible anymore. The black and white gala was exactly as pretentious as its name suggested. Held in K-Corp's event hall on the 20th floor, it was a sea of designer tuxedos and couture gowns, champagne that cost more per bottle than Renee used to make in a month, and enough diamonds to blind anyone who looked directly at the crowd. Renee descended the main staircase on Yun-seo's arm, wearing a white gown that Soo-jin had selected elegant, sophisticated, with a slit up one side that made movement easy. Her hair was styled in an updo that had taken an hour, and she wore jewelry that was probably insured for more than her life. Every eye in the room tracked their entrance. "Smile," Yun-seo murmured. "You're supposed to be enjoying yourself." "I'm about to commit a felony. Hard to enjoy that. Think of it as aggressive asset recovery." He guided her down the stairs, his hand warm on her lower back. "And you look stunning, by the way. I forgot to mention that. You're just saying that because I'm about to risk my life for you." "I'm saying it because it's true." He grabbed 2 champagne flutes from a passing server, handed her one. 30 minutes. Then you disappear." They worked the room together, Yun-seo introducing her to board members and shareholders and business partners who all looked at her with barely concealed curiosity. The chairman's new girlfriend, pulled from nowhere, clearly not from their world. Renee could see the calculations in their eyes, the wondering about her motives, her background, her worth. James Park appeared exactly 15 minutes into their circuit, his smile warm and his eyes cold. Yun-seo, so glad you could make it. Uncle. Yun-seo's tone was cordial, but his hand tightened on Renee's waist. You know, Miss Caswell. Of course. Your new assistant. James's gaze raked over her, assessment and threat in equal measure. Lovely dress. Quite a change from the mailroom, isn't it? Mr. Park. Renee kept her voice level, playing the role of decorative date. You'll have to excuse us, Yun-seo said smoothly. I promised Renee I'd introduce her to the board chair. They moved away, but Renee could feel James's eyes following them across the room. He knew something was happening. He just didn't know what. 25 minutes. Renee excused herself to the restroom, Yun-seo nodding subtly. The maintenance closet was exactly where Min-jun had said it would be, tucked behind a service corridor. The catering uniform fit perfectly: black slacks, white shirt, black vest. She stuffed her gown into a garment bag, grabbed the tray of empty champagne flutes that had been staged for her, and walked back into the gala as a server. Nobody looked at her. She was invisible again, just another worker moving through the crowd, collecting glasses, offering refreshments. It was almost funny how easily she disappeared. The service corridor to the executive floors was deserted. Security was light, everyone was at the gala or monitoring the gala. Renee took the service elevator to the 43rd floor, her heart hammering so loud she was sure someone would hear it. James Park's office was at the end of the hall, his name on a platinum plaque. The door was locked, but Sujin's lessons paid off 30 seconds with a tension wrench and a pick, and she was inside. The safe was behind a painting cliché, but effective. Renee pulled it aside, revealing a digital keypad. She entered the code Yun-seo had provided, 072856, his father's birthday. The safe opened with a satisfying click. Inside were the ledgers, 3 of them, red leather, gold initials, exactly as Yun-seo had described. Renee pulled out her phone, started photographing pages. Account numbers, transactions, dates, amounts. Everything they needed to prove James had been stealing for years. She was halfway through the second ledger when she heard voices in the hallway. Just need to grab something from my office. Go back to the party. I'll meet you there. James. Coming here. Now. Renee's hands moved on autopilot, photographing the remaining pages as fast as possible, returning the ledgers to the safe, closing it, replacing the painting. She shoved her phone in her pocket and looked around for an exit. The door was opening. Renee dropped to the floor and rolled under James's desk, pulling herself into the knee well just as the lights flickered on. Through the gap between the desk and the floor, she could see expensive dress shoes James is moving across the room. He went to the safe, opened it, pulled out the ledgers. Renee held her breath, praying he wouldn't notice they'd been moved, wouldn't feel the residual warmth from her hands, wouldn't somehow sense that his evidence had been compromised. Perfect, he muttered to himself in English. Everything is perfect. He closed the safe, returned the painting to its place, and walked back toward the door. But he stopped before leaving, and Renee's heart nearly stopped with him. I know you're in here, Miss Caswell. She closed her eyes, every muscle tensing for the fight or flight that was coming. I saw you on the security feed, James continued, walking through the service corridor, entering my office. Did you really think we wouldn't be watching? Did my nephew really think he could outmaneuver me so easily? Renee stayed silent, her mind racing through options. Run. Fight. Scream. None of them good. Come out. Let's talk about this like reasonable people. She didn't move. Couldn't move. James sighed. Fine. Have it your way. He pulled a phone from his pocket, pressed a button. Security. I have an intruder in my office. 43rd floor. Send a team. Then he left, closing the door behind him, and Renee heard the distinctive click of the lock engaging from outside. She was trapped. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, called Yun-seo. He answered on the first ring. "Are you out? I'm trapped. Your uncle made me. Security is coming." A pause. Then, "Where exactly are you?" "Under his desk. He locked me in. Stay there. I'm coming." "Yun-seo, I'm coming. Trust me." He hung up. Renee stayed crouched under the desk, listening to her own ragged breathing, waiting for security guards to burst through the door and drag her away. Minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an hour. The door exploded open. But it wasn't security. It was Yun-seo, Min-jun behind him, both looking like they'd run the entire way from the Gala. "Come on." Yun-seo reached under the desk, pulled her out. "We need to move now." "How did you—" "Master key. Benefits of being the chairman." He grabbed her hand, and they ran out of the office, down the corridor, toward the service elevator. Behind them, she could hear shouting, the thunder of boots on marble. They made it to the elevator, the doors closing just as security rounded the corner. Inside the descending car, Renee gasped for breath, her whole body shaking with adrenaline. "Did you get the photos?" Yun-seo asked. She nodded, pulling out her phone. All 3 ledgers, every page. He kissed her then, hard and desperate and relieved. "You're brilliant. You're insane, but you're brilliant. Your uncle knows. He's going to move against you tonight." "Let him try." Yun-seo's smile was sharp as broken glass. "We have what we need. Now we just have to deliver it." The elevator doors opened on the 20th floor of the Gala. They stepped out, Yun-seo straightening his bow tie. Renee suddenly aware she was still in the catering uniform. "Slight problem," she said. Min-jun appeared with her garment bag. 4-minute costume change. The restroom, now. Renee had never changed clothes so fast in her life. She burst out of the restroom in her white gown, hair slightly messed but otherwise presentable, and found Yun-seo waiting for her. "Ready?" he asked. "For what?" "To end this." He took her hand and led her back into the Gala, which had continued without them, champagne flowing, music playing, the city's elite completely unaware that everything was about to change. Yun-seo walked directly to the stage where a small band had been playing, took the microphone from the surprised singer. "May I have your attention, please?" The room slowly quieted, hundreds of eyes turning toward the stage. "Thank you all for attending tonight. I know you're here to celebrate another successful year for K-Corp, but I'm afraid I have some news that can't wait." He pulled out his phone, connected it to the room's projection system. "My uncle, James Park, has been stealing from this company for 3 years. He's embezzled over $7 million, funneling it through shell corporations to offshore accounts. And tonight, I have proof." The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. James stood near the back, his face pale with rage. The first image appeared on the massive screens around the room, a page from the ledger. James's handwriting clear, numbers damning. Then another page. Another, a litany of theft, documented in his own hand. "These ledgers were kept in his office safe," Yun-seo continued, his voice carrying easily over the growing chaos. "They detail every transaction, every stolen dollar, every betrayed trust. I have copies on every server in this building, backed up remotely, provided to law enforcement and the SEC. There's no way to destroy this evidence, no way to explain it away." James was moving now, pushing through the crowd toward the exits. But Yun-seo's security had been ready. Men in black suits materialized, blocking every door. "Uncle," Yun-seo said quietly, his eyes finding James across the room. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you really believe you could kill me, steal my company, and get away with it? You have no idea what you're doing," James hissed, his composure finally cracking. "I built this company. Your father was nothing without me. You're nothing without me. You're right about one thing. I was nothing. Yun-seo stepped down from the stage, walking through the parted crowd toward his uncle. I was a man who trusted no one, who saw enemies everywhere, who lived in isolation because everyone in my world wanted something from me. But then someone showed me kindness. Real kindness, with no agenda. And she reminded me that there are things worth more than power. Things worth protecting. He stopped in front of James. You tried to kill me in the rain. You threatened the woman I care about. You stole from my father's legacy. And you expected me to what? Ignore it? Accept it? Die quietly? You're signing your own death warrant, James spat. You think exposing me will make you safe? There are others. Others who want you gone. I'm not alone in this. I know. Yun-seo's smile was cold. And they're all in this room right now, watching you fail. Watching you become a cautionary tale about what happens when you betray the Park family. So thank you, Uncle. You've made it very easy for everyone else to remember why loyalty matters. Security moved forward, taking James by the arms. He struggled, shouting threats and curses in Korean, but they dragged him toward the service entrance anyway. The room watched in stunned silence. Yun-seo turned back to the assembled crowd board members, shareholders, business partners. K-Corp will continue under my leadership. Anyone who has a problem with that is welcome to leave now. Anyone who wants to remain part of what we're building, I expect your loyalty and your discretion about tonight's events. Are we clear? Slowly, people began to nod. Then someone started clapping the board chairman and the applause spread through the room like a wave. Not enthusiastic support, but acknowledgement of power, acceptance of the new order. Yun-seo walked back through the crowd to where Renee stood, still shaking, and took her hand. Let's get out of here. They left the gala together, walked out into the cool night air, away from the music and the champagne and the wreckage of a coup that had failed before it could begin. In the street, Yun-seo's car waited, Minjun holding the door. Where to? The driver asked. Anywhere but here, Yun-seo said, pulling Renee close. Somewhere we can breathe. They drove through the city in silence, Renee's head on his shoulder, both of them processing what had just happened. They'd won. Against all odds, with a stolen gown and photographed ledgers, and 20 minutes of terrifying improvisation, they'd actually won. What happens to your uncle? Renee asked finally. Legal proceedings. Probably prison, if he's lucky. If he's not. Yun-seo trailed off. The syndicate has its own justice system. He knew the risks. And the others? The ones he mentioned? Will fall in line now that they've seen what happens to traitors. I've consolidated power, proven I can't be easily removed. The succession war is over. Just like that? Just like that. He tilted her chin up, his eyes soft in the passing streetlights. Because of you. Because you were brave enough to help me when I needed it most. The car stopped at the penthouse. They rode the elevator in comfortable silence, walked into the space that had become a strange sort of home over the past few days. So, Renee said, kicking off her heels and immediately feeling 3 inches shorter. What now? Now? Yun-seo loosened his bow tie, looking more relaxed than she'd seen him since the rain. Now I offer you a choice. What kind of choice? Stay or go. I can set you up anywhere you want, new city, new life, enough money that you'll never have to worry again. You've done what I asked and more. You don't owe me anything else. Renee walked to the windows, looking out at the city where she'd been invisible for so long. And if I stay? If you stay, I'd like to offer you a real position. Not my assistant, chief financial officer. You found the corruption in 3 hours that my entire accounting department missed for years. You understand numbers, people, systems. You'd be incredible at it. I'm 24. I don't even have my degree finished. You have instincts worth more than any degree. And you have my trust, which is worth more than anything else I could give you. He came to stand beside her. "But more than that, I'd like to take you to dinner. Somewhere normal. Somewhere we can be just two people who met in strange circumstances and maybe found something worth exploring." Renee looked at him, this dangerous man who'd been vulnerable in the rain, who'd protected her when she needed it, who'd trusted her with his life and his empire. "You know I'm still terrified of you, right? Of this world you live in? Good. Fear keeps you sharp. But maybe also—" He took her hand, kissed her knuckles gently. "Maybe you could be a little bit interested in seeing where this goes." She thought about her old life, the basement mailroom, the invisible existence, the constant struggle to survive. Then she thought about her new life, the danger, the excitement, the feeling of mattering, of being seen. She pulled her old intern badge from her purse. She'd kept it as a strange sort of talisman, and walked to the trash can. The plastic ID with its bold intern label looked so small, so powerless. Renee dropped it in the trash. "I'm staying," she said, turning back to Yun-seo. "I'm staying. And I'm taking the CFO position. And I'm accepting that dinner invitation. But I'm also keeping my own apartment once it's safe to go back. And I'm not playing decorative arm candy for your business meetings. And if your family tries to kill me again, I'm going to be very annoyed." Yun-seo laughed a real laugh, full and genuine. "Fair terms. I accept all of them." "Good." She walked back to him, rose on her toes, and kissed him softly. "Now let's talk salary, because I have student loans and a mother who thinks I'm a corporate star, and I'd like both of those things to be manageable. Whatever you want. Be careful saying that. I'm an excellent negotiator. I'm counting on it." They stood together at the windows, watching the sun start to rise over the city. Two people who'd met in the rain and somehow found their way through violence and betrayal to something that looked almost like hope. Renee Caswell was no longer invisible. She was the CFO of a massive conglomerate, the woman who'd saved a mafia boss's life and his empire, and probably falling in love with the most dangerous man she'd ever met. But she was also still herself. Still kind. Still brave. Still the woman who'd knelt in the rain with an umbrella because someone needed help. And that, more than anything else, was why Yun-seo trusted her. Why he loved her, though he hadn't said it yet. Why she was going to change everything about how his world worked. Because in a life full of calculated moves and ulterior motives, Renee Caswell was real. And real was the most dangerous thing of all. 3 weeks later, Yun-seo kept his promise and took her to dinner. Not somewhere fancy, not somewhere connected to business or power. A small Korean restaurant in Queens where nobody knew who he was, where they could sit in a corner booth and eat bibimbap and talk about normal things like favorite movies and childhood memories. "This is nice," Renee said, watching him struggle with enthusiasm to teach her how to use chopsticks properly. "Almost makes me forget you're a criminal mastermind. Alleged criminal mastermind. I prefer legitimate businessman with complicated hobbies. You literally run a mafia syndicate in my spare time. Mostly I run a multinational corporation." He grinned at her. "Totally different." She threw a napkin at him, laughing, feeling light in a way she hadn't felt since before the rain. Maybe before ever. They walked through the city afterward, hand in hand, just two people in love with the night and each other and the impossible story that had brought them together. And if there were security guards following at a discreet distance, and if Renee's new phone had a direct line to Yun-seo's protection detail, and if they both slept a little easier, knowing the succession war was over, well, that was just part of their new normal. She'd saved a stranger in the rain. He'd saved her right back. And together, they were building something worth more than empires, something real.